All right, Dennis, why don't we get started?
But no. Good afternoon. I'm Dennis Galucki, and welcome to the 494th Imagine Greater Buffalo program, as well as our 116th video Imagine program, hosted by our wonderful Cultural Center in downtown Buffalo, the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library. We're so glad you've joined us today. This program is created by the Center for the Study of Art, Architecture, History, and Nature, or C-SAAHN, as I pronounce it, and ImagineLifelongLearning.com. Now, before we get started, just a little housekeeping. Everyone watching will be muted and your video turned off. If you have a question or comment, please type it into the chat box and we'll go through them at the end of the presentation. We are recording this program, so you can watch it again later on the Downtown Central Library's Facebook page and YouTube channels, and we certainly hope you share the link with others. Now, on to our featured speaker. Felix Klempka was born and raised in North Buffalo, Black Rock, and Riverside. After going to university, Felix lived for several years in the Bay Area of California. Felix returned to Buffalo in 1972 at the request of Ramel Tick, who had offered him a position as chief engineer of QRS music rolls. In addition, they inaugurated the QRS Great Performers Recital Series, for which Felix acted as concert manager for over 20 years. Felix retired from those positions in 2005. In 1986, Felix joined the Polish Arts Club of Buffalo. He has been on and off its board of directors ever since. In addition to his work with the Polish Arts Club of Buffalo, he remains busy with all things musical, such as the Buffalo Philharmonic, Buffalo Chamber Society, Buffalo Chamber Players, organ recitals, and all such wonderful organizations and events. So now, let's hear from Felix Klempka. Felix, take it away.
Thank you, Dennis. First, I want to thank everybody here at the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library for all the cooperation in our latest effort. The Polish Arts Club of Buffalo was begun in 1945 as a group of basically artists, painters, sculptors, people of letters, some professional people, as a kind of a club. But they soon realized that if they were to grow, they needed to let more people in. First, more Poles and Polish Americans, and then anyone who was interested in the history and culture of all things Polish. They were heavily active through basically the their first president, Eugene Dichkovsky, who was a muralist and was for a while the director of the old Albright Art School, which is in the brick building directly next to the Albright Knox Gallery and across from the Birchfield Penny. Eugene had gained a prominence as a muralist, basically through the Works Progress Administration, which was a government program to keep artists busy and decorate all of the buildings the government was putting up to counteract the Depression. He has murals in several buildings in the city, Burgard High School, hospitals, other public places. But I got involved originally over something he did at Fort Niagara. Most people think of Fort Niagara as the old French fort, but for many years it was an active military base for Army and Navy personnel. The Officers Club building had burned in the 30s and the government rebuilt it and needed some artwork in it. So they hired Eugene to go there and do some murals in what was the officers' mess on the ground floor. Beautiful paintings illustrating the history of weaponry. They're quite striking, and they cover two outside walls of the Officers Club. At some point, that property was turned over to New York State Department of Parks and Historic Preservation, and they decided to make some use of the building by leasing it to, I guess it was out for bids, but originally it was awarded to a Canadian restaurateur who wanted to turn it into a restaurant, and which would have been fine, except he wanted to turn that officer's mess room with the Dichkovsky paintings into a kitchen. Well, we didn't like that idea. If you've ever been into a restaurant kitchen, you know what they can do to the walls. So we approached the director of Parks and Historic Preservation, and she said, well, the contracts are signed. There's not much we can do about it. So with that in mind, we approached the restaurateur and explained to him our concerns about the paintings and the value of them. And lo and behold, he was the right kind of person and tore up his lease and said, go to it. So it was then turned over to the Conservancy for the fort, the old fort, and they turned the building into a museum. For a couple of years, I and other members of the Polish Arts Club acted as docents there, taking tours through the building. And then eventually I was training other docents so they could take it over. It was, that was our first major project that I was involved with. But shortly after, I discovered that our president at the time, Peter Gessner, was heavily involved in promoting the work of Joseph Sławinski. Joseph was born in Poland and raised there and in Italy, and trained as a muralist. He came to Western New York on a visit in 1961 through 63. He returned in 1964 and lived and worked in Buffalo, Niagara area until his death in 1983. Sławinski, a remarkably gifted artist whose work has been compared to such great Mexican muralists as Diego Rivera, worked in a variety of media, including fresco, hammered copper, scratch tempera, and wrought iron. But his favorite medium was sgraffito, a subtractive technique involving 2 or more layers of cement, which need to be worked on while still wet. Sławinski extended the technique to 4 layers of colored cement, a technique that gave magnificent results but was very labor intensive, and one that, to the best of our knowledge, has not been duplicated in the United States. Through his work found throughout the US, his richest body of work is in the Buffalo Niagara area. The Piarist fathers, who ran the Calasanches School in Buffalo, had acquired Gray Cliff, the summer home of Darwin and Elizabeth Martin in Derby, New York. The estate had already passed from the Martin family. The Piarists knew they were getting a summer home designed by famous architect Frank Lloyd Wright, a structure lacking a ready purchaser other than themselves. The structure in need of some change in order to make it winter habitable, I guess. They also knew their own mission. The Piarists are a teaching order whose founder was a 17th century Spaniard named Joseph Calasanz, in Latin, Calasanches. Calasanches is the name of the order, as given to many of the schools it has founded, including the one in now closed in Buffalo. After the Piarist fathers left Western New York, the Graycliff Conservancy took it over and were determined to return it to its original look, which meant that the building they put the sgraffito on had to go. Are we on the first slide now? Yes, good. That's how it looked when we first saw it. The building is horrible, and it was in the driveway blocking a view of the Frank Lloyd Wright house. So it had to go. The Conservancy director, John Conlon, offered the artwork, this magnificent mural, to the Polish Arts Club of Buffalo. Our then president, Dr. Peter Gessner, led the project forward. It took 4 years until 2003 to raise $250,000 to remove the Piarist mural from the dormitory, which was then demolished. It took almost 2 more years to relocate the mural. The engineers who did the moving were the same ones who moved the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, the International Chimney Corporation of Buffalo, New York, believe it or not. The mural, which was heavily damaged by lake winds and freezing, was restored by the McKay Lodge Fine Arts Conservation Laboratory near Cleveland, New York. The mural, after it was fixed, was moved to the campus of the Buffalo State College, now university. It's behind the Lockwood Library. You might be interested, with all of the renovation we had to do to keep it in one piece and move it, it winds up weighing 18 tons. We thought we had identified and documented just about all the Swabinsky art in Western New York until last winter. I got a phone call from a couple, Jerzy and Tanya Swabinsky, the son and daughter-in-law of the artist. I had never known he had a son, so it was quite a surprise. They said they had a substantial mural by Joseph, and they wished to donate it to anyone who would find a way to get it publicly displayed. They said that Joseph had created it in the expectation that it would be placed in the Buffalo City Hall. City Hall is a major component of the art of the mural, among other things. But for some reason, that never happened. When Joseph died in 1983, his widow, Wanda Sławinska, who was the librarian in charge of the Dr. Franjak section of the Lockwood Library, gave it to Yartsy, who took it to his home in Murrayville, Pennsylvania, near Pittsburgh, where it had remained for the past 40 years. As the Sławinskis were contemplating retirement and downsizing, they thought that it would be most appropriate that if he returned to Buffalo, which is the subject of the sgraffito, Wanda Sławinska suggested that I, who was heavily involved in the Calasanchez project, would be a good bet to take on the project. I told them that I was uncomfortable with accepting it personally, but if they would give it to the Polish Arts Club of Buffalo, I'd do my best to find a permanent home for it. So there they are, delivering it to my home in Tonawanda one wintry day. Incidentally, if you think those two old men in the picture were capable of getting that well over 200-pound piece off the back of that truck, you're sadly mistaken. Luckily, the photographer from the Ample Eagle, our Polish newspaper, showed up, and he's a Husky. Peter helped us get it off. I first contacted Joe Gołąbek, our North District councilman, who had played a vital role in the Calasanchez project, and asked him how I should go about finding a venue for this heretofore unknown mural. He put me in touch with Emerson Barr at the Buffalo Arts Council, the commission, I should say, who recommended our old friend David Granville to help me. My first choice, Buffalo City Hall, had become problematical as the new security measures there had reduced public traffic. Also, the hall already contained two pieces of Sławinski art in the form of two hammered copper pieces, the memorial to the Katyn Forest Massacre in the lobby and the City of Buffalo seal outside the mayor's office. So David then introduced me to Joy Testa Cinquino of the Buffalo and Erie County Library, who came to my home to appraise it. She was highly impressed and assured me that the library would be pleased to accept it if we could locate someplace in the building where it could be best viewed. After a few visits, we decided on an area adjacent the Ellicott Street entrance. The Polish Arts Club of Buffalo Board of Directors voted to accept the transfer, and on March 15th, the dedication of this magnificent tribute to the city of Buffalo was complete. Please make sure that you visit this piece adjacent the Ellicott Street product. There it is, with County Executive Mark Polenkars, myself, the Sławinskis, Tanya and Yartsy Sławinski, and John Sloan, director of the library. Here are some, if you're interested and would like to know more about Joseph Sławinski, our very next program will be at the Harlem Road Community Center on April 19th at 7 p.m. The talk will be delivered by historian Evelyn Ash, who's a real expert on Swabianski. I never met him. I came back to Buffalo in 2000, let me think, no, not 2008, 1972. And he was still alive and active, but I wasn't involved with too much Polish. I was too involved in player piano roles. But and running a concert series. But she knew all about him. He was a bit of a private person. I don't know that he got to cozy with a lot of people. I'm not saying he was a misanthrope. He just, very few people have had any contact with him. One person who knew him quite well was our current second vice president of the Polish Arts Club, Stanley Nowak, who was a teacher at the West Hurdle Middle School when Joseph was doing a very large sgraffito in 4 panels on the history of shipbuilding at the mouth of Skajackwada Creek. They were building at the time ships that Oliver Hazard Perry used to win the Battle of Lake Erie and pretty much cut off British support for its troops in the Midwest. In any event, Stan said that he was putting this work on the wall right outside his library door, and he got involved with him, and Joseph actually let him inscribe some of the concrete, which sounds like a dangerous thing to do. But it went quite well. I wish I'd met him. I wish I'd known him, because I had, although I wanted to be a musician when I was younger, I discovered I was no good at that. I did a lot of artwork. I was, in fact, a student at the old Albright Art School there on Elmwood Avenue. I remember going there every Saturday morning to do watercolor lessons. I was also familiar with Tony Sisti, who was world famous at this point. I started out, actually one of my cousins was one of his students, and she took me along as a 12-year-old to act as a model for his painting classes. And he gave me drawing lessons for free, which I thought was very nice. So I thought I'd be an artist for a while too. But that's my history. The Polish Arts Club puts on programs demonstrating the history and involvement of Poles and Polish Americans everywhere. And we're quite active in that. And the programs are always well attended. And if anyone's interested in learning more about the history of Poles and Polish Americans, especially in Western New York, they might consider coming to one or more of our programs. Non-members are charged $5, but it's well worth it because you get some free food at the end. We do serve refreshments after every lecture. That's all I have to say.
Well, that was plenty, Felix. My hat's off to you for your years of service to this community. And it's folks like you in a volunteer capacity that really, in my estimation, make Buffalo a very, very special place. A lot of volunteers doing good work. And you've had a varied career. And I had never seen a picture of that painting at the Great Cliff, the way it was positioned. It was interesting, to say the least. So with that, I will open it up. Joy, let's invite people to send in any questions they may have. But Joey, why don't you just tell us from the library's perspective, and again, reiterating where people will find this work of art and why it's important for the library to have accepted it.
Sure. Good afternoon, Dennis, and hello, Felix. On behalf of the library, we were and remain very excited to be able to house this beautiful mural. I want to say one of the most exciting things is when you look at it, and it is kind of hard to tell just from a little photo if you're on your computer or you're on your device. If you look at the mural, you will see a buffalo in it. You will see City Hall in it. You will see the Peace Bridge in it. You will see what I think is the library in it. And again, this was produced 40 some years ago. It's kind of like a Where's Buffalo in the spirit of Buffalo. One of the things that I learned today from Felix, and I did have the pleasure of meeting Felix this past fall, I didn't really come to appraise the piece because we don't do that, but I came to look at it, and I think Felix was appraising the library at the same time, because it was a little bit of a switch that this would hang at the library. But you have to remember, the library, a public place, opens 7 days a week during the school year. People coming in and out from all walks of life, from families, to researchers, to people who just want to use our Wi-Fi and our computers, to people who are coming into this building that has so much history in it and holds history and holds Buffalo genealogy and holds a lot of things that mean very much to the people of this community. So the library really was the perfect location for it. The mural does hang at our Ellicott Street entrance. That's Ellicott Street, which is between Clinton and Broadway, or Clinton and William. It's one of our main entrances. If you come in after a certain hour, you can use an elevator or a staircase or anything to get down to look at it. And you can go right up to it and touch it. So that's a wonderful thing. I'm going to pose one question because I know we'll end pretty much on time today. And I don't know how many questions have come in. Felix, I never did ask you this. Did he realize how important his work was during his lifetime? Was it accepted? Was he recognized? Did he make a lot of money?
Well, it's interesting. I was unaware of him until after I joined the Polish Arts Club, and only to find out that the club was conducting bus tours of the breadth of his work, which starts up in Lewiston, it's Stella Niagara, and goes clear down to Graycliff in Darby, New York. But once I started seeing it, I realized this was a major artist, and he was appreciated even around the world. Although the problem was his work in sgraffito was so labor intensive that you couldn't get anyone else to pick it up. I mean, it's to this day, no one is doing it because you have to work so fast and be good at what you're doing. And if you make one mistake, you've got a very heavy piece of garbage. So we may never see the likes of it again. And even when I first started the first pieces of it, because it's dimensional, it has depth. Especially this Spirit of Buffalo piece is particularly inspiring because if you walk back and forth by it, it seems to move. It's like a 3D movie almost, because the graduations of shading change ever so slightly. So you have the feeling that since it's supposed to represent a dynamic city, the piece itself is dynamic. I claim, I've always said that the work of Joseph Slavinsky reminded me of the first time I saw Grand Canyon. Nothing you've ever seen in pictures or film or any other source prepared you for the actual vision of it. You can show all the pictures you want of sgraffito, and it doesn't mean anything until you actually get there and see what they are.
I want to jump in. Mary Simpson, who's on the call, wrote that she worked with Dr. Gessner to raise funds to move Calasanctius. It was a remarkable experience to learn about the PAC, Dr. Gessner and Slavinsky. She believes the tools the restoration company used belong to the artist. He has accessible artwork everywhere in Western New York, and he deserves more recognition. Thank you to the library. Thank you to the Polish Arts Club of Buffalo. Thank you to the city of Buffalo and anybody who cares about artwork for making sure that this is accessible to our community. Thank you, Mary.
Any other questions do you see, Joy, or not?
Okay, so if I'm going to do all the questions, let me just go back real quickly, and we probably just have time for one. One that I'm seeing. Caitlin, I don't know if you see other ones, but Felix, does the artist family have any additional photos or anything of him making them, actually putting the murals together?
I don't think his son did. His son came to this country and he was born in Poland, and he came here in the 70s, he told me, and he didn't have a lot of truck with his father. There was some family dynamics going on there where, I mean, they were cordial, but they weren't friendly. So no, they since they didn't see much of each other, he doesn't seem to have much. But when he died, of course, his stepmother invited him up, and he helped her with the funeral arrangements and all, which is when she gave him this Spirit of Buffalo sgraffito. Interestingly, it never had a name. I named it because it just begged to be named, and it symbolizes everything that was going on in Buffalo in the 70s, the dynamics of a Rust Belt city clawing its way back, and with a long, vibrant history of wonderful architecture and business and culture. And Joseph somehow managed to capture a good deal of that in this mural. It's quite impressive.
Felix, if the library owns it right now, does it have the right to reproduce an image of it so that it could be shown as this wonderful image, as you describe, Joy? You describe it so well to say the more you look at it, the more you begin to see all the elements of Buffalo. So Felix, your title, The Spirit of Buffalo, seems most appropriate, but what's your sense? Could this be promoted as an image that gets to be identified with the library?
Well, the Polish Arts Club of Buffalo placed no restrictions on the transfer. It belongs to the library. They can do as they will. I have full faith that they will do whatever is necessary to promote art as they promote everything cultural in Western New York. So I have full expectations that they will do the right thing, and we're willing to cooperate in any way we can to help that.
Great, that's good to hear. Now, we'll finish up by pointing out that the whole month of April is National School Library Month. And what the Imagine Greater Buffalo series has done is kicked off a series of speakers that will point to that from different dimensions. And I wanted to start with this one to show literally how the downtown Buffalo and Erie County Public Library is really much more than a building with books in it. We've come to know that certainly over the last several years, especially during COVID. It becomes this community center with 37 branches throughout Erie County that are available, pretty much available many hours, let's put it that way, of the day and week. So next week, for instance, oh, and by the way, the other point, some of these, are they all publicly available? Because on your website, Felix, is a list of all of his artwork and locations, both in this area and outside of Buffalo. So I'm just wondering, I know the one that you alluded to Well, the one that was moved from Great Cliff now sits on the rear side of the Butler Library at Buffalo State College and is very visible, but you have to know it's there to get to the back side of the library around the corner. You'll see it from the parking lot in the back, but I'm not sure the general public is walking by it very often. But it is worth seeing and walking right up to, and as you pointed out, and touching. Being able to touch artwork is most unusual, but this, much like a sculpture, is out in the elements, and it holds up beautifully and worth seeing. I encourage people to do so if they haven't.
Well, that Calisanctius mural is, the description behind the library makes it formidable, but the fact is, if you drive up Iroquois Drive, which goes along Scajaquada Creek, it's quite evident that you can see it. There's a parking lot adjacent to it. You can't miss it. It's in a shelter, sheltered on top and two sides, and it's on the leeward side of the building, so it's not going to get the same treatment that it got at Great Cliff. It'll last for many, many years with no problem. But it is viewable without actually going into the library or around it.
And is that the case with other works that they're available to the public, or are they more private?
Well, in the churches, of course, all churches are public, more or less, during
The churches are
hours. But there's a major one, the history of the Polish Americans in Buffalo, at the Erie County Medical Center. And Villa Maria has some pieces. When the buildings are open, of course, anybody is welcome to see them. The ones at Stella Niagara, they're out in a park, some of them, close to the river, which is open to the public. There's also a lot of his artwork in the chapel at Villa Maria, and also the chapel at St. Francis in Athol Springs. However, those you'd have to make appointments to see those because they're not public buildings.
Felix, thank you for bringing this great artist to our attention. A treasure under our noses, and you've helped us appreciate it. So thank you. And folks, thank you again for joining us today. We'll see you back here on Zoom next Tuesday when we're joined by Christine Cashbaum. Now, she's the director of the library at Canisius College, and we'll hear a bit about its history, and we hope you can join us then. I'm Dennis Galucki. Be well and good day.